if your goal is a total anchored against other people's performance, you're going to need to be watching the scoreboard and have a plan A, plan B, plan C. If they do this, then I do that. And how do I have to go through? And it gets more complicated, but welcome to competing. How aggressively you pick your attempts should depend on the type of meet that you signed up for. And there's a very specific strategy that I'll use that actually led to, at one regional competition, one of my went best lifter by zero point 0.3 points. And so by the end of this podcast episode, you're going to know exactly how to set your expectations and scale your attempt selection, whether you're stepping onto the platform for the first time at a local meet or fighting for placing or records or best lifter awards at state, regionals, or even nationals. And if you've got a meet on the calendar and you're not sure how aggressive your plan should be for your attempts, just click the link down in the podcast description and I'll reach out and talk with you to figure out what kind of goals you should be setting and talk about how I can help you with bringing your best PR total to the platform. Zach, how's it going today, man?
Pretty good. Yourself?
Yeah, it's been pretty solid. Um, I've been thinking back about the last long time I've been coaching at this point, and just the range of competitions I've competed at personally, and the level of competitions I've had lifters compete at as well. And there's a lot of different themes that we can get into in terms of expectations we'll place, expectations that lifters will place on themselves, expectations with how they anticipate a meet to go. You'll see it a lot with lifters who even just burn out a bit, where they place like all this pressure on themselves without building a base. But one of the big things that I see that comes up is lifters, having these very high goals and aspirations for themselves with trying to be as competitive as possible, but then misplacing that effort on the type of competition they're doing. And almost, I don't want to say taking it too seriously, but doing it in a way that doesn't really serve them in their long-term development to really win or be as competitive as possible at the meets that matter. Right. And that can be the difference between like a podium and sixth place if somebody's not paying attention to things.
Yeah.
So
Like,
how do you look at, attempt selection? You've got a lifter going into a meet, let's say for the first time versus a lifter going to their second nationals, for example.
I mean, almost
What's the
inevitably,
process?
when it's a first time lifter, I'm like, we're going to hit some singles in training. You're going to match those singles on the platform. We're just going to look to walk away with the experience of a first competition. Right. And I think framing it that way to the lifter is important, right? Because there are lifters who stress themselves out on their first competition. Like, oh, I'm going to go in, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And then they like, number one, they just send it on lifts that they have no justification loading. Like, all you pulled in prep was 450 and it was a grind. Why are you loading a 500-pound third deadlift? Because you want to chase, like, then you're number one, risking injury, but number two, just like, you're going to be bummed out when it doesn't happen. So immediately framing it as like, if it's your first competition, we're just going in and trying to match what we hit in training just so we have proof of concept. Um, and beyond that, telling the lifter, just have fun, talk to some people, be in the atmosphere. Don't like put on your headphones and like be huffing ammonia and like locking in between attempts. It's like, bro, it's a local meet. There's 30 lifters. You're the only one in your flight in your weight class. So don't worry. I think that just has to be said.
Yeah. And I think at a local meet, like the big thing to really consider is you're either going to use it as a springboard to qualify for a bigger meet, right? Or you're just lifting against your own training numbers. And regardless of who shows up, if there's a bunch of national level competitors or like nobody shows up, it fundamentally is not going to really change the attempts that you make for the day, because it's either like go hit some PRs and have fun, or use it as a way to get into the next bigger pond, right? Like nobody really cares if you win like a local meet, right? You're big fish in a small pond, and it's a great starting point to build from. But your motivations, I think, should be a bit more internal or at least progression based.
Yeah. Yeah. If anything, like there's two sides of the coin, right? If you are somebody who is at the end of the day an elite level lifter and you're doing a local level competition, unless there's a cash prize involved, you are probably only doing it for a qualifying total of some kind, whether that be state, regional, national. Um, and if you are truly at that level, there's a good chance you're not even taking all your attempts, right? Like the thing that I've said to another lifter before is like, I'm good for nationals next year. I do not need to compete until next year's nationals if I wanted to. If that was not the case, I would go to states, I would take my openers and I would leave. I don't care about placement at that point because the higher level you get, I don't want to say the lower levels become less valuable to you as a lifter, but you need to know what to prioritize and when to prioritize things. And especially meets that you are only doing to serve a qualifying total purpose. Okay, maybe you want to test out some kind of tapering strategy or some kind of cut strategy. There's some more argument to be made there. But you know, when I go to the Arnold or when I go to states and all, there are people who are there just to hit the QTs. And that's all they're chasing. If they get more, they don't really care.
I mean, that's really for me, like I've got a blend of meets that I need to participate at and hitting a new QT because I hit what I needed to in November last year, and then they upped it like in February of this year. So I'm like, all right, cool, I need to do that. And so like my next two meets, I've got provincials in August and then westerns in October. And like provincials is week 2. I'm like not fully not joking when I say I'm going to go hit my top sets at the meet, and then I'm going to, after I'm done coaching for the day at provincials, I'm going to go home and hit my back downs in the
Yeah,
garage.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's week 2. I'll have been like back to, I'm like 11 days into the training block or something at that point. Like that meet just doesn't matter to me. And if I was to try to be like, oh, I'm stepping on the platform, I need to take this super seriously, I would destroy my prep for westerns, which is actually the meet that I even care about this year because that is the one where I'm more concerned with hitting a qualifying total, and B, like it's a bigger meet. It's literally more important than provincials in the first place. And like as you get to the national level and the field gets deeper with, from a local meet, you're going to go up to a state or provincial level meet and then regionals and then nationals eventually. And, here in BC, at least like the qualifying total for provincials, it's so competitive that they just use the regional qualifying total at this point because they're like, there's too many lifters at provincials. It's like a 7-day event if we don't make it just as hard to get into as regionals. And like, I support that decision. Um, because competing at a qualified meet shouldn't be you and the 15,000 other people that qualified in this country. Right. Um, but as you get to those higher level meets is where you need to get more strategy in terms of, okay, is send it and hit PRs on every lift, like really what we need to go after? Or is there a bigger picture strategy that we're going towards with building towards a specific total, or there's maybe a specific record we're chasing on one lift, right? And if it's deadlift, like you're probably not going to go max your squat as hard as you can earlier in the day. And even from there, like on the day, your game plan for attempts might change with uh, battling it out on third deadlift if you are going for a total or a placement or a best lifter kind of award.
Yeah,
That's where
absolutely.
it gets a lot different. And so, like for somebody who's not familiar, how does that play out? Because like I've never really had to battle it out on deadlifts. I tend to make more of my total earlier in the day, and then I just go deadlift after basically because whatever's there is there. Um, you're kind of the same way as well with the subtotal specialist accusations, right?
Dude, like going into deadlift, I was third. I was third at nationals going into like subtotal. I was third place, and we got to deadlift, and I dropped down to 12. Like
Oh my god.
it gets crazy, but like there is a level of like you can see what's happening. You're aware of what's going on. Um, the reality is, yes, the meet is not over until the last deadlift, and the person who was um first, I think the person who was either first or second was going into that with like a 340 or 350 deadlift. So like they were going to be fine on deadlift anyways. Um, but you watch it in the back room where everybody's kind of tied at the same area going into deadlift. Everybody was in that like 420 to 430 range. Some people were closer to 500 like myself, and there were some people who were a little bit lower. Um, and very quickly first attempts get through. Everybody like could have jumped with their first attempts. They were all just getting a number on the board. Second attempts rolled around, and that's where we started to see people like actively looking at, I weigh this much, this person weighs this much. I saw in their training they pulled, let's say, 320. I'm good for about 320. So I'm gonna maybe take 305 or 310 as a second attempt, hope that they load 320 as their second and then miss it. And then I have more give on my third, knowing that I can beat them on body weight anyways, and that's where that starts to shake up and where something as simple as just like lot number, body weight becomes a very serious thing to consider versus at like a state or local level meet. Ultimately, a state meet or a local meet's there to get you into states. States is there to get you into regionals, and regionals is there to get you to nationals. If you want to be a local meet hero and just send it at every local meet, that's great, whatever. But if you want to like actually compete in the sport, and I think that is a difference between someone who wants to get stronger and someone who wants to compete. You need to look more critically at these things. So there are lifters who'll go in and be like, "Oh, I hit a 2.5 kilo PR on all three of my lifts," and I'm like, "That's great, but like if you had just matched your squat and bench, you could have added 10 kilos to your deadlift, and then you would have had a total PR, and you would have placed."
Yeah. And I feel like that's the big difference, right? With, like you mentioned, guys who are just like, I just want to get stronger, right? And they might actually still compete. And then lifters who are very much there to be as competitive as possible, right? And that's where you have to start looking at like, there's one way you win a meet and it's on total, right? And then there's best lifter award as well, which is points, which is derivative of your total, right? And your body weight and your gender. But um, it's so individual. And like, that's where going into, looking at, okay, what does this guy do? Is that normal for what his deadlift is? And so on. And I'm actually just pulling up, there's one story I'd love to go through with regards to like basically going cross-eyed in the back room as a coach, watching the scoreboard and being like, okay, like how the heck did we take best lifter? Because that was one of the goals, right? Because one of the first things that I'll do with every lifter is, before we're actually at the meet, we want to figure out, okay, like what are our objectives? And like you said, like those, is the local meet just like, hey, I want to compete, I want to have a goal to focus on, and I want to get stronger and some PRs? That's entirely valid, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
but the flip side to that is, well, if your goal with this meet is to take best lifter because it's you've done regionals or you've done nationals a couple times and you're trying to be like genuinely competitive against other lifters of a similar caliber, well, we need to get more granular with having like a plan A, plan B. If they do this, what are we doing over here? And um, I think it was, yeah, it would have been Westerns that we won by zero point 0.3 points or something ridiculous. And it basically, what it came down to was points because it was a lifter in another weight class, but they were competing in the same flight. And as we're going through deadlifts, like I'm looking at the scoreboard with who's got what for points at the time. And I, I was watching their lifting earlier in the day because I figured it would probably come down to like this lifter I was working with and this one that I'm watching. And it looked like she was kind of having a so day, like just grindier than she normally would be on numbers that I seen on like her open powerlifting and on her Instagram where she was like normally doing quite well with them. I'm like, I don't know if she like cut weight into this meet or whatever it was, but ultimately at an outcome level, she was having an iffy day. And then I looked at where her deadlift was opening and then we didn't change our opener, watched her open her deadlift and I was like, it looks normal, but normally she goes up by a larger jump into her second. And I'm like, okay, well, I've never seen on all of the meets she's done on her open powerlifting, I've never seen her take that small of a jump first to second deadlift. She's probably not that confident, right? And what it had come down to is on thirds, she took a bigger jump because she was watching the total and she's like, I'm just going to load whatever I need to do to win, right? And to take best lifter. And we called the bluff and we said, hey, we're just going to stick to the game plan here because I have very little confidence that you're going to hit that. And like we didn't take the bait. And is that a way higher level of complexity with competing than most lifters ever have to get into? Yeah, absolutely. But keeping it in line with like, let's keep the goal, our actions have to align with that. And if your goal is to just hit some PRs on lifts, good. Make sure whatever you're choosing is to hit PRs on those lifts. If you have a goal of building a big total, make sure the numbers you're taking on each of the lifts does that. If your goal is a total anchored against other people's performance, you're going to need to be watching the scoreboard and have a plan A, plan B, plan C. If they do this, then I do that. And how do I have to go through? And it gets more complicated, but welcome to competing, right? Powerlifting is a simple sport at the end of the day, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing to it either.
Yeah, and it's as simple as understanding, like you said, like number one, if you're going in with the competitive mindset, and again, this is your regional and national level meets, no one cares if you win local, no one cares if you win states really. Usually, like I've been involved with states here in New Jersey for the past couple of years. I won a couple of years, and then I moved up a weight class, and I was commentating the weight class that I had won, the 82s, and it's almost always like you have someone in that like 720 to 730 range, and then the next person's in like the 680 range. So no one really cares, right? Because you're taking candy from a baby at that point. Um, but as you get into those higher levels where you do have to look at attempts, something as simple as knowing that, like, hey, this person pulls sumo and they missed their third squat on strength. So there's like a 30% chance that they're going to miss their third deadlift on strength. Like, that is a very clear statistic. You look across at, like, IPF Worlds. If you jump more than 10 kilos into your third bench attempt, the chance that you are going to miss that lift goes up by, like, 70%, and that's where you get that, like, sea of red in the third attempt benches. Um, and that's, like, a very real thing that, like, you have to be aware of. So when we were at nationals, we were projecting my total to be somewhere around 800 kilos originally. That was like the game plan. We took a little bit less on squat going into it just because I got 4 hours of sleep. And I'm like, 4 hours of sleep, 300 kg squat. I'm not going to say no to that, right? We'll walk away with that. Bench, I straight up just jumped the press command on the opening attempt, which totally on me. So originally we were going to go from 195 to 202, which would set us up for like 210 to 212 on the third, knowing that was probably about where, if training lined up well, that's what it would have been. But because I missed that opener, Sean and I said, okay, let's take 200 as a second, plan to just go as high as 205 on the third. But we're doing this with the understanding of, like, we're in a good spot with squat. We're benching more than most people in the flight. We're going to deadlift less than most people in the flight. And right now, we just need to get a number on the board. And it was a good call because I got, rightfully so, punished for jumping that press command. They made me do like a 2 count, 3 count pause with 200 keys because of that. And that's something that we had considered. It's like the same as if you miss your opening squat on depth, guess what? They're watching you very closely. I missed my opening bench on the commands. Guess what? They're watching me. So we did that, set ourselves up nicely, and then I ended up losing grip on my third deadlift anyways. It didn't matter, but, like, as far as the adjustments that we made in the day goes, that's reflective of what competing is like, and not just going in and, there's absolutely some validity to doing powerlifting for the sake of, like, codifying your lifts and saying, like, I do this for fun and I want to make it official, and I want to um be able to say that I've done this and that these are validated lifts and not gym lifts. But when you get to be competitive and the higher level you try to compete at, the more these little micro adjustments, like the 2.5 kg difference in bench, didn't seem like a lot when we made that decision. But looking back on it, that allowed me to register a total, because if they were going to make me do a 2 count or 3 count pause with 202, I probably wouldn't have gotten it. We ended up just scratching the third at that point because we're like, there's just no value. We're in a good spot. We're ahead of most of the pack. We can just walk away with this.
Yeah. And I think there's a very good lesson in there as well, just being flexible as well. Like we're going to go in with a plan of how we want the day to go and how that's going to line up with our goals. And then there's also going to be the reality of how many tornadoes were in Chicago
Yeah. Right.
that made
How
it,
many flights
we'll
were
say,
canceled
less
on
than
the week?
suitable. Yeah, exactly. I got
Um,
the text from Dan when he was heading out, and I was like, hmm, um, cool. So you're flying in like a state over, and you're going to drive in with your girlfriend's parents to get you. Not like, I'm like, am I ever happy you decided to go 2 days early? Because can you imagine? And like same even locally, like when I was handling Mike at the meet back in April, and it was like we had to take a ferry, and like BC ferries is notoriously unreliable, and we're like, well, this meet is in the sticks, so let's give ourselves like at least a couple sailing buffer on this one, just as an insurance policy, because if they cancel something, like there's no, I'm not going to swim across the channel.
yeah, yeah.
like that's it. And luckily, everything went great. Like he got on the ferry, he was there early, and there were some other issues that really stressed me out going through equipment check, but that's
That's a difference.
unrelated again.
Yeah, like I'm
But
Rising Tide is in Philly this year, and I have a friend who's competing in Rising Tide. So my younger brother still lives in Philly. That's out in that's like literally the last day, August 30th or something. I texted my brother yesterday. I'm like, "Hey, can I crash at your place on this night?" Knowing that like driving from where I'm at in Jersey to Philly, there's always construction, there's always delays, there's always a ton of traffic. There's New Jersey drivers don't know how to drive, and Philly drivers are too aggressive, and it just doesn't mesh well. There's always accidents, right? So I'll get there the night before, have a place to crash, and I'm good to go for the morning. I have that buffer now.
yeah, and a lot of it just boils down to like there are going to be so many variables competing at any level, right? Like nationals, tornadoes,
Yeah.
right? Like just that's going to be. I'm going to keep telling that story for a little bit because like
Dude, last year they
tornadoes
lost
is
power. There was a tornado, there was a
exactly.
hurricane the year prior, and they just lost power during the
Yeah,
meet.
we had that as well at I think it was like 3 or 4 years ago. It was at the Olympic Oval. It was a
Yeah,
great
yeah.
venue for a meet, but literally lost power from a windstorm. And so like all the scoreboards on this is before everyone was like they're like super excited about having the iPads, but like nobody remembered the fact that there are physical cards. And it was just like this whole like reacquaint everybody with having and
Yeah.
props to the meet director because the meet went quite well for having like 3 or 4 platforms at the same time and no power. I'm like, damn, that's excellent. Um, but there's going to be so many wild cards that come up that if you're not walking in with some kind of a game plan on here's what I want to get out of the day realistically, that it's just going to get compounded and you're going to have so much extra pressure that you put on yourself at a meet that might not really align with your bigger reason for doing it, right? Like if you're trying to be the most dominant force at a local powerlifting meet and like all you're really trying to do with competing is just like having a date to work towards and like competing is fun because you like going up against other guys, like how valuable is it for you? Like if it happens, awesome, but don't make it your main reason for being there, right? Because if you end up being this big fish in a small pond, you're just going to be like, wow, I really took that seriously.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then you're gonna be like, okay, well, I don't want to go to the next level and compete at states or regionals, and that's okay. But if you're putting all this pressure on yourself, you're gonna feel burnt out and you're gonna probably just not want to keep doing it as well if it doesn't align with your purpose for doing it in the first place. And so like it's hard because as lifters, we all want to progress and do more. Like we're all in it because we like the numbers. I like seeing it go up. I like the process. I like all those things. But there's some like default goals that we'll end up setting as well without thinking about it. And it can be a dangerous, slippery slope to go down at the very least. Yeah. Okay. Anything you want to add before we close this one up?
I think just with the idea of putting pressure on yourself, you know, you talk to anybody who is competing at a higher level or who is um potentially they're going to nationals or they have a game plan. Like I have a friend who very realistically will be competing at Worlds in 2027. They have dual citizenship. They're going to go to their home country and they're likely going to get their very good lifter, like a 540, 550 dots lifter. They'll probably be prime time in nationals that year. Um, but you talk to them and they're far out from the meet and they understand that. They're not stressing out about numbers. They're not pushing themselves unnecessarily or putting all this undue weight on them. And you see it like 6 to 8 weeks out. That's when the paradigm starts to shift. That's when they start to mentally lock in a little bit more. Um, it's great and all to have a lot of intent throughout your training year round, but you have to also understand why you're doing it and understand when you can actually make that shift happen and how much of that you can tolerate. This person's an excellent athlete. They hit all their top sets. They do all the right things, and that's part of the reason why they're so good. And obviously, genetically, they're just gifted. But um, a lot of it is just understanding they don't operate well when they're stressed, and stressing themselves out about training year round leads to injury and leads to burnout versus being a little more lackadaisical. "Oh, I'm going to go to the Yankees game, have a couple beers, and lift the next day, and just take what's there." That works well for them. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's I do the same thing where it's just like, I just let training be flat. Like I'm still going to go train, but like I almost don't let myself get too excited about it either. I'm just like, I'm just
Yeah,
going to go lift because like I want to and it's fun. And like I understand that the work I'm doing right now might not be peak performance currently, nor does it have to be, nor should it be. But at the same time, like as long as you're building towards that sort of bigger picture goal and that aligns with why you're doing it in the first place, just like don't stress out too much about it here. Like we're lifting weights. Okay. Like really focus in when there's a meet that lines up and is very important for you, but be willing to just go put the work in without having pressure. Because if you feel like you always have to have that pressure, it's you're on a limited timeline with lifting and in a sport that takes 5, 10, 15 years to get actually genuinely good at it. You're not going to reach that if you're always trying to just be like optimized and then checked out. Cool. Fantastic. Um, okay, wrapping things up. If you do have a meet that's coming up and you want some help with figuring out, okay, how do your goals for this meet align with your intent and your reason for lifting? You can click the link in the podcast description. It'll get you in touch with me directly. We'll take a look at your weight classes, competition you're stepping into, who you're going to be up against, and put together a plan so that we can help you to hit the biggest possible PRs that align with your goals for your upcoming meet. Zach, thanks a lot for the pod.